Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia and our first Rewind episode. Essentially, these are themed episodes which go back over some of the more fundamental, and in some cases simpler, content that the constraints of university life haven't allowed me to cover so far. And this week, we're going to start with arguably the most fundamental concept of all in biology, the cell. For those of you who are biologically trained, this will involve an explanation of the history of cell theory, so I apologise in advance to any of you who have heard all of this before. The term cell originates with the English scientist Robert Hooke, who in 1665 published a book of 60 observations called Micrographia, which he presented to the Royal Society and dedicated to the king at the time, Charles II. Observation 18 of this tome involved Hooke making a thin slice of cork and examining it under a microscope. What he saw was a lot of little hollow compartments. In the case of the cork, this is where cells used to be and had died, leaving only the outlines of lignin that had been in their cell walls. Hooke named these structures cells, after the cells of a monastery, which are the residences of monks. Fast forward to 1838, and we get two German scientists working on plants and animals, Theodor Schwann and Matthias Schleiden, respectively. And for those of you who know the name, this Schwann is the man whom the Schwann cell wrapped around some neurons is named after. Schwann and Schleiden compared their observations and discovered that each had come to the same conclusion for their respective kingdom of life, that the body was made up of individual cells. Three postulates were formed as a result of this in 1839. The first was that all life was made up of cells. The second, which builds on the first, states that the cell is the fundamental unit of life. Put another way, without the cell, you cannot have a living organism. I know some of you will now be thinking of viruses, but whether or not viruses are in fact alive is a hotly contested area of discussion, which we are not going to follow in this episode at least. Finally, the third postulate released at the time stated that cells formed by crystallization. According to an article on the subject in the National Geographic, this was refuted by Rudolf Virchow in 1858, who stated that cells could only come from pre-existing cells, giving us cell theory in its modern format. Robert Remak had actually come up with this idea in 1852, but Virchow apparently plagiarized it as his own, hence it is his name that is commonly associated with the third postulate. So, that's cell theory. In essence, it's the recognition that cells are fundamental to life itself. There are obviously lots of other topics that we could still cover, such as the Virchow-Remak plagiarism controversy and the use of microscopes by Dutch scientists Antony van Leeuwenhoek, but for the sake of brevity and simplicity, I'm going to leave it here for now. Hopefully, we will come back to these thinkers and their ideas in the future. In the meantime, thank you for listening. We can be contacted, as always, at biopediapodcast@gmail.com for any questions, comments, or topic suggestions. Until next time, have a great week.